The anime started with Usato. He is a pathetic loser high schooler with nothing going on in his life. Bad grades, no friends, no girls, just like you. In short, he's the nice guy who helps some birds on a usual day. Yet, he wishes he was in a fantasy world to cure his boredom of being an ordinary loser, but one day someone steals his umbrella and he decides to wait for the rain to pass because princesses cannot get wet. However, despite the waiting, the rain never stops. Suddenly, he hears the student council president Susan and asking him what's going on. She asks if he doesn't have an umbrella, and despite being nervous around her, he confirms. She tells him the school is about to close, and Usato takes it as a clue to get his ugly face out of her sight. He decides to leave, but the beautiful and perfect president stops him by telling him she won't let him get wet. Suddenly, Vice President Kazuki appears, the typical perfect dude, and claims that he will let Usato have his spare. Susan asks if they're friends, but Kazuki replies they're classmates. Usato is confused because they never spoke before, but realizes that he's the typical disgusting nice guy. Usato thanks him for the umbrella, and Kazuki asks what they should call him. Susan steps in the middle of them, telling him she will also call him Usato. Our pathetic loser blushes, thinking she's trying to flirt with him. They ask if he wants to walk home with them, to which he also cannot believe he gets the chance to walk with the cool kids. He accepts the deal, and as they walk, Usato explains that Kazuki only talks to girls and stuff. Kazuki's answer is that he simply answers the girls' questions. Susan teases Kazuki's popularity, and Usato tries to give his best shot. He mentions how Susan is pretty much a goddess. Yes, he barely leaves his mom's basement. Susan calls herself an average student, but Kazuki also decides to join the Dumb and Dumber party, mentioning how perfect she is. She's the best student, great at sports, kind, and also pretty. Usato then decides to give his shot and asks if they're a couple. The two get confused but explain those are just rumors because they spend tons of time together in the student council. She still feels impressed that Usato is the only person who had a pair to ask it. Susan asks if Usato has some plans for the future, but he plans to stay in his mom's basement. Kazuki mentions that she asks the same question to everyone. Susan replies that she's just curious because she has none. Usato asks why she doesn't, and she reveals that she doesn't have any because she accomplishes all her goals pretty fast. She reveals that for that reason, she feels isolated and doesn't think she belongs to this place, but Usato thinks that they're quite similar as they feel the same thing about their lives. Suddenly, Susan and Kazuki heard a bell and stopped. Usato is confused and asks what's going on. Kazuki asks if he heard the bell, but Usato doesn't. They hear the bell again, this time even louder, but Usato still cannot hear it. He gets closer when suddenly a magic circle appears under their feet. Kazuki starts to freak out, but Usato spits some facts. They're being summoned to another world. Kazuki thinks that this loser is crazy, but Susan's reaction shocks them. She's smiling while asking if he means that they will reach a place full of magic monsters and heroes. In those last moments, Usato is impressed about how Susan has a thing for that stuff. Seconds later, they open their eyes to find themselves inside a strange room. Upon looking around, they see a random geezer sitting on a throne. Usato is confused about this place and its people, but Kazuki doesn't know. He then looks for Susan just to find her hyped and smiling because this is another world. He thinks she just went bonkers. The old geezer sitting on the throne is happy they managed to wake up and stuff, but Kazuki arrogantly asks, "What is this all about?" The geezer introduces himself as Lloyd, the king of Linger. Kazuki is confused, but Susan is happy about it. The king explains they have been summoned as heroes, which makes Susan even happier. The king explains the same garbage as always as a demon lord who resurrected and is currently raising its armies. The kingdom has been attacked for the past 2 years, but they barely survived. Their last hope was to the forbidden spell to summon heroes from another world to fight against the guy who was cheated on by his wife. Susan is always acting ecstatic every time she hears something new. However, Kazuki gets mad and tells him to stop kidding. He literally calls the king selfish for dragging them here and doing the dirty work. He asks them to return them to their world, but the king explains that's not possible because the summoning only works in one direction. Kazuki continues his Karen mode, mentioning they all have families and stuff. The king replies they are desperate, but Kazuki couldn't care less. He gets angrier, but the soldiers point their arms at him. Usato tries to calm him down, and Kazuki finally follows some good advice. The king walks forward and kneels in front of Kazuki, promising to find a way to send them home after the job is done. Everyone else also kneels, and Susan asks the king why he is calling them heroes. The king tells his mage Welsi to explain. She reveals that the summoning spell seeks people who have the potential to become heroes. In short, everyone with that potential will hear the sound of a bell ringing. Susan and Kazuki understand that condition but then remember that Usato is different. They ask if he truly didn't hear anything and he confirms, which means he got here by accident. His parents didn't want him nor this world, just like you. They then go into Wellesley's room to check their magical aptitude. All they need to do is touch the crystal ball and they will find which magic they can use. Susan becomes all hyped out while Wellesley starts preparing for the test. Meanwhile, Kazuki asks Usato if he's alright with all of this. Usato says it's fine as Wellesley already told him he could probably still use magic despite not being able to be a hero. However, Kazuki is talking about being summoned to this world against his will. In his case, they didn't even want him. Usato dismisses it because it's all he wanted. Kazuki thinks that Usato is pretty chill about it, but he mentions that Susan is the odd one. They look at her being a typical weirdo and think that's true to the point that Kazuki thinks this is her being an optimist. Usato knows this is not the case, but they suddenly see the crystal ball glowing. Wellesley made all preparations and told Susan to start her test. She happily touches the crystal ball and a yellow glow appears. Wellesley explains that this means that she can use thunder magic, but she also has a huge amount of mana. Kazuki thinks that Susie looks happy, but deep down Usato knows this magic fits her fantasy dream. Kazuki then touches the crystal ball and it turns white. Wellesley explains he has a light attribute. Susan becomes all hyped up telling him to use a laser beam and stuff, but Usato tells her to stop being a nerd. She gets annoyed that Usato cut her off, but she then reveals that she likes that in a man. Usato feels shattered. He thought of her as the perfect girl. Turns out she's a freak. Wellesley explains that light magic is the strongest attribute because it counters the Demon Lord. Usato decides to try it too, but there's a flash of green. Susan and Kazuki think that's a beautiful and calming color and ask Wellesley what is that attribute. Yet, Wellesley is freaking out. She grabs Usato's hand and runs back into the throne room. The king is confused but asks if they already checked their aptitudes. Wellesley confirms mentioning Kazuki and Susan's huge potential, but there is a problem: Usato. The king laughs while asking if he has the power to control darkness or something, but he's shocked when he learns the crystal turned green. Wellesley explains his attribute is extremely rare, but the king tells her to shut up and not say it. Usato is confused, thinking his attribute is bad. The king starts to plot, mentioning they must take Usato as far away from the castle as possible. However, he doesn't think there's any safe place. Maybe they should hide him in town for a while. Meanwhile, a woman is walking in the hallway. The king tells his guards to make preparations, but Usato says that he doesn't understand what's going on. He asks if he's dangerous and if there is someone else with his attribute. The king freaks out as he replies yes, but that person is bad news. Suddenly, the woman walks into the throne room scaring everyone. This is the person the king was talking about. She asks the king how the summoning ritual went and if the heroes are already there. The king tries to play it cool, asking if it isn't her off day. Yet, she refuses to take any off days. She then notices Usato and asks if he's the hero. Usato gets scared and crawls back, and the king explains he was summoned by mistake along with the heroes. He calls Usato an average pleb, but she clearly notices the king is sweating. She asks for his name and introduces herself as Rose, the captain of the rescue team. Yet, Usato clearly knows that she looks like someone who should be killing, not rescuing someone. While she intervenes, mentioning the heroes are waiting by the crystal ball and tells her she will take Rose there, Rose accepts that and prepares to leave. The king feels relieved everything went well and tells Usato to rest while they figure out what to do in his situation. Usato accepts, but he wants to know what his magic attribute means. He stupidly asks what a green light means. Upon hearing those words, Rose stops. Everyone inside the room starts to freak out. Rose turns back and asks if he just said green. Usato confirms and she tells the king that she will be taking Usato with her. The king freaks out, telling Wellesley to get Usato out of there. Wellesley casts a spell creating a bubble around Usato, forcing him out of the castle. Yet, Rose smiles and dashes outside with her insane speed. Wellesley's bubble gets out of the window and tries to take him as far as possible outside the kingdom. However, Rose's speed and power enable her to catch up with him. She then punches the bubble, breaking it. Usato thinks he's done for. After all, there are no parachutes in this world, yet Rose manages to reach and catch him. She uses a statue to break down her fall and calls out the king. She tells him that she will turn Usato into a proper healer and walks away. The king shouts at her to return, mentioning that he knows that she wants to recruit more healers. However, Usato was summoned by accident. Rose ignores the king and continues walking. After returning inside, Wellesley explains to Susan and Kazuki that Usato was taken. They're worried he might be in danger, but Wellesley explains that's not the case. Kazuki wants an explanation. She reveals he was taken away from the castle to the rescue squad. She reveals that Usato's attribute is healing magic. Healers are rare in this world and Rose is one of them. Meanwhile, Rose is taking Usato under her arm to her base when a fox girl pays attention to what's happening. Wellesley continues to explain that Rose will basically teach Usato everything she knows. Susan thinks that's pretty normal, but Wellesley reveals that Rose's training methods are unorthodox, which means Usato will be living in hell. After reaching the base, Rose explains Usato has the potential to become a healer. He's pretty confused, and she reveals he will be living here from now on, and that's the reason she brought him. She then calls the rest of the members, but when Usato looks at them, he realizes they're literally a band of bandits. Rose tells them to take care of Usato, but they all look at him like serial killers. He tries to back away while scared in fear, but the guys introduce themselves, which looks more like a robbery. Yet, Rose kicks Ton away because Usato is crying in fear. They complain, mentioning they were introducing themselves in a nice way. Rose then explains they all belong to the squad but are not healers. In fact, her rescue squad has only 2 more healers, but they're stationed somewhere else, which is why she will personally teach him about healing magic. Usato freaks out. His instincts are telling him to scream and run, but he can't move. He tries to ask for another instructor, but she ignores him while saying the training starts tomorrow. She orders Tong to show Usato the place and leaves. The bandit gang smiles at him and tells him how miserable his life will become because Rose will be teaching him. In short, he will be living in hell. During the night, Usato is initially worried about everything, but he then realizes there is no point in worrying and falls asleep. The story continues. We see Usato wakes up and realizes that it wasn't a dream and that he's really in another world. One of the guys comes to his room and tells him that he has visitors. He steps outside and meets Kazuki and Suzune, who are relieved that he's alright. He apologizes for worrying them and tells them he's still alive. That's until he remembers that Rose exists and that she will train him starting today, which means that he might not be alive tomorrow. The two are surprised about this supposed hellish training and asked if he's prepared. Kazuki confirms, mentioning he has nothing else to do, but this is also a chance to do something useful. Suzune is impressed by those words and reveals they will also start their training today. Usato mentions that he's curious about their training as heroes mostly because he thinks their outfits look cool. Suzune laughs it out, but Kazuki thanks him, mentioning that those words made up his mind. Usato is confused, but Kazuki turns to Suzune and promises to give his best in this world. As the two depart, Usato thinks that Kazuki had a hard time adapting to this new world to become a hero. However, Suzune is the one chilling as this is all she wanted. With that in mind, Usato promises himself that he will be able to help them someday. Rose suddenly steps outside and asks if the heroes are gone. Usato gets scared to return to reality and doesn't reply. She asks if they had a nice long chat and Usato turns robot slave mode, thanking her for her concern. Rose then explains he's not in prison and he can meet his friends when he wants, as long as he is in training. Usato thanks her and she gives him a diary. She explains that he should write down his training program experiences or whatever he wants with that. She warns they will be start training after breakfast. His first day of training was the opposite of hell. In short, his first task was to concentrate and relax. He feels something on his chest and Rose explains that's magic and she will teach him how to project it out of his body. Usato is confused, but she simply tells him to focus on feeling magic first. After finishing that training, Rose orders him to read a book. Usato is confused because he cannot read the language in this world, but upon opening it, he realizes that he can read and understand. Rose explains that upon being summoned by the hero ritual, everyone has a translation spell cast on them. Using the images, Rose explains their current location and where the demons live. Usato realizes they're close to each other and she replies that Linger is the demon's first target. She tells him to read the book because he will learn about the world, nations, races, and demons. Usato starts reading it, thinking this training is easy. However, the second day was different as Rose forced him to run, which had nothing to do with magic. On the third day, he was forced to run until his body couldn't handle it anymore. As a result, his body gave up and he fell, but Rose got mad and asked him why was he resting. Usato explained that his legs gave up, but Rose slapped them with healing magic. He rolled around complaining about the pain until his dumb face realized that he didn't feel any pain at all. Rose calls him trash while explaining that she healed all his muscle soreness with magic. Therefore, he should start running once again. Usato gets up and runs for his life, but she tells him that even if he dies, she will heal him back to life just to make him run. Usato thinks she's out of her mind, but he has a way to vent his frustration writing in his diary. On the fourth day, Usato started to train with the other squad members. However, the bandits were insulting him as they overlapped him. Rose also joined them because military training doesn't exist without insults. This only makes Usato plan his revenge by venting on his diary. He continued to run during the 5th and 6th days, but Rose still thought he was slow and insulted him. He ends up hugging the floor and again decides to vent on his diary. However, while trying to get up he notices that his hand is glowing. He's confused that it looks like healing magic but doesn't understand why it's activating. The 7th day is a bit different. He runs until exhaustion and then becomes Rose's kicking bag. Rose then approaches him and tells him the more he hates her, the harsher she will become. Usato was shocked as he realized that she read his diary. She looks like a psycho, but there's no way she knows how to read Japanese. She then picks him up and throws him into the air, ordering him to start running. Usato tears down midair and promises that from now on he will call her the muscle-headed demon gorilla in his diary. Days 8 and 9 were pretty much the same: run into exhaustion, get kicked, and repeat it for the whole day. However, without noticing, Usato was healing himself every time he got injured. He later realizes that he's using healing magic as second nature as he doesn't feel pain or injuries. He then realizes that he doesn't want to use healing magic because he needs to use it without being ordered. Usato starts running again. Things started to change on the 10th day. Since he now knows how to use magic, he can now run without getting tired. However, deep down he still had doubts if he could help Kazuki or Susan, as he can only run. Still, he doesn't question Rose about it because he knows she will kick him again. Yet at that moment, she orders him to run 30 more laps and pick up the pace. Despite being mad about it, Usato promises that he will finish this training and show her who's the boss. That didn't last long, as the next day Rose added 1,000 push-ups to his training program. Usato knows he cannot do it by himself. That's why he continues to use healing magic to make sure his body can handle it. Rose then asks if he knows why she's forcing him to train his body. Usato almost stops to answer, but she explains it's because he needs to run from the enemy on the battlefield. Usato is confused, but she also reveals that he needs to save his fallen comrades. Therefore, the faster he runs, the faster he will be able to save them. Usato is surprised by those words, but she orders him to continue doing push-ups. He continues the training but is surprised that Rose didn't yell at him today. He thinks he should be happy about it, but in reality he's scared. On the 12th day, Usato ran during the whole morning and spent his afternoon doing more push-ups. Rose didn't yell at him again, but he noticed that his body felt a bit lighter. Yet, Rose also noticed something was going on and added some weights while he ran the next day. He continued to train that way until he noticed that on the 14th day his lunch went missing. He asks the guys about it, but Tong simply replies it was delicious. Usato gets mad and throws a cup of water at him, followed by a punch. Tong dodges it as he explains that internal fights are banned from the squad. In the end, Tong runs away laughing while Usato chases him without any effort despite carrying some weights. Yet, he realizes that he's probably being brainwashed because he doesn't complain as much. On the 21st day, Kazuki and Susan visit him alongside the princess and a knight. Upon arriving there, they get shocked to see Usato doing push-ups with Rose sitting on a huge rock on top of him. She complains that he's too slow and motivates him to not quit. Usato refuses to quit and continues the exercise. Rose asks if he just replied to her, but our boy grows a pair and says that this is too easy because she's light. Rose mocks him and jumps down to place another rock on top of the other. Despite the initial shock of regret, Usato continues to push forward using his magic to heal himself. Rose even admires his determination, saying that he's becoming her type of guy, and that at this rate she might take him with her way sooner than she thought. The other two cannot believe Usato is going through this, but Susan quickly starts trolling after checking his muscles. However, the knight gets angry and grabs Rose's collar and asking what she is doing. He claims that she's trying to destroy Usato, but Rose simply replies that he should release her. The guy holds on, but she grabs his hand as she tells him that he trains his knights however he wants, but she will use her methods to make Usato become her right-hand man, therefore she cannot go easy. The knight and Usato are both shocked by those words. Rose reveals that Usato is a catch. He hates losing, but what she loves the most is that he doesn't give up. Yet, Usato gets worried because this knight will probably make his training harder. Rose then orders him to take a break and have lunch. The knight then tells Kazuki and Susan to take care of the princess while he speaks to Rose in private. As they leave, the knight complains that the king ordered Rose to re-enlist despite his objections. Rose refuses to re-enlist, explaining that she misses one eye. While resting under a tree, Usato finds out that the guy is the kingdom's strongest knight. His name's Siglis. He is the one who's teaching Kazuki and Susan how to use the sword. Usato finds it impressive but turns to the princess asking who she is. She introduces herself and he apologizes because he was being rude. She tells him to be comfortable around her and Susan mocks Kazuki as he also reacted in the same way. Kazuki then asks if Usato's training has always been as bad as just now. Yet, Usato simply replies that today was pretty easy and asks about theirs. Kazuki replies that their training is hard. He explains that Sigler's teaches them swordsmanship while Welsi teaches them magic. However, they always consider their physical and mental conditions. Usato thinks that's normal, yet Rose is just built differently. Kazuki then apologizes, but Usato doesn't understand why and tries to get another slice of pie. Susan uses this chance to check out our boy's muscles. Usato gets shy, but she's all into his huge abs. Even the princess cannot contain her curiosity. Kazuki then continues explaining that he felt like Usato was having a hard time. Usato confirms that he had it really hard in the beginning and wanted to run, but he's fine now. They get curious and he explains that Rose scares him, but he doesn't feel like running away because he enjoys training and life here. Susan is impressed that he already found a place to belong, but Usato dismisses it, calling it being stubborn. He shows his healing magic and explains that they will be fighting as heroes, therefore he also wants to help with something. Susan uses this chance to flirt, telling him to save her when she needs it. Yet, Usato simply tells her it's too late to act like a normal girl. She gets mad, but even the princess agrees with him. Suddenly, Tong appears and mentions that he has Usato's lunch. Usato gets all annoyed and pulls his mafia face, questioning his attitude and smiling despite what he did. Tong also uses his mafia face, telling Usato to forget about the past. Usato gets up, refusing to forget about his missing lunch, and charges forward. Tong also pulls out his fist and they end up punching each other. The two start brawling in front of everyone, making the princess scared. However, Kazuki tells her it's fine as it seems like this is just a normal day. Susan confirms, mentioning that it seems like he's fitting in this world way faster than them. Yet, this motivates Kazuki to return to the castle and continue his training. In the end, there's no clear winner as Usato and Tong get bruised faces. During nighttime, Usato is chilling as he takes a bath and thinks that it is nice to see his comrades. However, Susan creeped the hell out of him, yet that made him realize that his body had changed. He realizes this is the result of training his muscles until exhaustion and healing them with magic. However, he remembers Rose's words that he needs to run as fast as he can on the battlefield and wonders if he can do it. He's still unsure if his determination can match his strong body. The next day, Rose throws him a bag and tells him they will head outside. The bandit-looking guys get worried as they reflect on those words and realize it's finally time. Usato gets confused, but Rose simply takes him to the castle gate and tells the guard he will be taking someone outside. The guard is wetting his pants and rushes to open them. Yet, Usato doesn't know about the outside. They start walking and he asks where they're heading, but Rose tells him to shut up and follow her. After some hours they reach a cliff. Rose reveals that ahead of him there's a forest called the Darkness of Linger, which is famous for having dangerous monsters. She then gives him his orders. He can only come home after killing a grand grizzly. Usato tries to refuse it, mentioning that monster usually becomes the strongest monster after 100 years, plus he doesn't know how to fight because she only taught him how to run. Yet, Rose gets annoyed and throws him into the forest. The story continues. We see Usato begins to fall from the sky and he panics as he will surely not survive. However, just then his body begins to glow with his healing magic. Usato finds the determination inside himself to survive no matter what, so he uses his healing magic to brace himself for the impact. Usato can't believe that he survived and he heals himself so he can do what Rose told him. He won't be able to go back until he does, so he tries to have a good attitude about it. He convinces himself that it shouldn't be too hard since it's only a 2-meter tall bear, but he is stunned when it appears behind him. This thing is way bigger than he thought and even its claws are huge. Usato gets a bit confident that the bear won't be able to keep up with his speed, but he quickly finds out that it can. Usato reminds himself that he managed to survive the training from hell and this little teddy bear is nothing compared to Rose. Usato surprisingly turns to face the bear, but Winnie the Pooh with rabies has backup. Usato runs for his life again because the bear's cowards for ganging up on him. Just then, Usato hears a waterfall nearby and leaps into it to escape. The bears have no choice but to leave their prey and Usato uses the time to regather himself. All he has are some rations, a canteen and a knife, so he wishes Rose would have him something he could at least start a fire with. Taking down a grand grizzly is starting to seem impossible at this point, but he will leave that depressing task for tomorrow. Usato was just glad to have survived the first day and sleeps in a pile of leaves. The The next day, Usato begins to hunt and decides that he needs to learn more about his enemy. First he needs to learn where it lives, and he finds some scratch marks on a tree. Just then Usato prepares for the fight of his life as he hears rustling in some bushes, but it turns out to just be an innocent little bunny. It's actually a monster that looks like a rabbit and it seems to be injured. Usato heals the thing up and acts like a bunny whisperer as he tells it to be more careful. Usato continues the hunt, but the bunny follows him. He tries to explain that he's searching for a dangerous monster, so it should leave, but the dumb little bunny doesn't listen. This thing just won't leave him alone, so he begins to wonder if the rabbit's trying to show him where the grand grizzly is. Usato follows the little bunny and leads him right to the bears. Usato plans to monitor them without being discovered and notices that they seem to be a family. Usato takes a break to get some unclean water that he's a bit skeptical of, and he's shocked to see that the bunny still hasn't left yet. He goes back to continue monitoring and he began to think that the blue grizzlies are kind of cute. His bunny friend is pretty adorable too, so he begins to think that life in the forest is pretty good. That feeling wouldn't last long however, as the water he drank has a severe effect on his stomach. His healing magic is taking forever to make him feel better, so he determines that he was basically poisoned by the water. A day later it was titled Trusty Bunny Friend shows him where some clean water is and it's delicious. There is something wrong with Bugs Bunny though, and it seems to be because a monster is approaching. Little Bunny wasn't even scared of the Grand Grizzly, so whatever is approaching must be really dangerous. A noise can be heard in the darkness and Usato is shocked when a giant snake appears. He is terrified by this unbelievable monster and points out that there was nothing like it in the book he read. Even without knowing anything about it, Usato can tell that it's dangerous, and there is bloodlust oozing from every inch of it. When it leaves, Usato can finally breathe again and he decides to make it a priority to avoid that thing. For more days pass, but Usato can't shake an uneasy feeling he has. He has been observing the bears, but nothing has changed with them, and he can't go home without defeating the Grand Grizzly. Usato has to do it eventually, so he tells himself that he will do it tomorrow. The next day comes, but Little Rabbit doesn't want him to go. Usato gives in and decides to stay, but only until the rain stops. When it ends, Usato begins his mission and refuses to be stopped by Bunny. Usato readies himself for battle, but he is absolutely stunned when he finds that the lives of the bears have already been taken. The bite marks on the bears make it clear that the snake did it, but it didn't do it to eat. It took their lives for fun. The poor cub emerges from some rubble and tries to wake its mom up. Usato thinks about how much he hates losing, especially to Rose. On top of that, he hates the fact that his prey was stolen. As a little bear cries in agony, Usato states that what he hates worst of all is what he's looking at right now. He tells the cub to just wait right there and he vows to get revenge for it. Usato's friends go to visit him, but shocked to hear he has been training in the forest for 10 straight days. They think that seems a bit too long to be training out there, but the guys explain that Rose makes all the decisions. Rose isn't there though, so these useless guys have no clue what's going on. Kazuki is really worried about Usato, but Susan thinks he should be fine since Rose wouldn't have sent him unless he was ready. On top of that, Susan believes in Usato and she is sure he will be back soon. Back in the forest, our boy fuels his body with some snacks and makes a spear. He asks his little bunny to take him to the snake, but makes sure to instruct it to run away right after. The bunny takes him on a long journey through the forest and the two finally find the snake. Unfortunately, it is attacking the little cub and Usato was upset since he told it to stay home. This snake is absolutely terrifying to look at, but Usato insists that there's nothing scarier than Rose. Usato thinks the snake looks confused when he begins his attack, but it's not and it almost eats him. Usato counters with a stab to its eye, but he gets knocked back and he heals himself. Usato managed to blind it on one side, so he determines that it's a side he will have to attack from. This snake is insanely dangerous though, and it quickly manages to bite down on our boy's arm. Usato in immense pain, and he is shocked to realize that the snake baited him into attacking its blind spot. Usato was furious to have been tricked, but he reveals that the armpit was holding his knife. Usato manages to heal his arm enough so that it can move and stabs the snake from inside its mouth. Usato somehow managing to hold his own, but things take a real bad turn as he realizes that he has been poisoned. This is a seriously unfair fight, as the snake is both huge and poisonous, but Usato has the advantage of being able to heal himself. Getting poisoned by the water forced him to learn how to heal himself from the inside out. Usato does just that and prepares to attack again. This snake is about to end his life with one tail swinging though, but the little cub steps in to help. These two have great teamwork right off the bat, as the bear left suicidal jump off its back so he can get on top of the snake. Usato uses some foul language to call the snake stupid, and he somehow manages to land an insanely powerful punch. Usato's determined to end the battle right now, so he jams his spear further into the snake's head. He yells out as he gives it everything he has, and the little bear helps out by pinning the snake down. The snake is eventually defeated, and Usato can't believe that they actually did it. The bear seems to have taken a liking to Usato, and he points out how they got their revenge. He would like to heal the little cub, but he is using up all his mana to neutralize the venom in his body, and he can't even move. That's really bad news though, as he is shocked when the snake gets back up. Usato can't even move an inch, so the little cub tries to help him, but Usato just tells it to run away. The snake moves in to end his life, and Usato thinks about all the people in his life. He determines that this entire situation is all Rose's fault, and he yells out that she is a violent ogre. Just then, this violent ogre descends from the sky and shockingly stops right on the snake. Her angry attitude causes her to call the snake an idiot, and Usato wonders how she knew to come help him. Rose reveals that the bunny named Kukuru told her. Kukuru is her pet, and she told it to watch over Usato. Usato explains that the rabbit showed up injured and looking for help, but Rose just points out that he is a sucker. Kukuru put on an act to gain his trust, and he fell for it. Rose was always nearby in case you needed to step in, but she planned to intervene as little as possible. However, she never thought that the giant snake would appear. This snake was created by the Demon Lord's army, and Siglis failed to finish it off during the last invasion. She never thought it would be able to defeat a Grand Grizzly though, since they are strong enough to defeat a full unit of elite troops. Usato can't believe she wanted a rookie like him to take one out, and thinks about how much of a monster she is. Rose explains that she actually never expected Usato to win, and the goal was for him to gain experience fighting something much stronger than him. Things started to get interesting with Usato though, so she decided to let him keep going to see what would happen. Usato quick to point out that he almost lost his life, and his little cub backs him up. It has clearly taken a liking to him when Usato remembers that its parents aren't alive anymore, so it's all alone. Usato gets his new buddy to calm down, and Rose realizes that she was right. Usato is a lot like her. She angrily informs the bear that he will be coming with them, and he will carry the loser that couldn't even lose his life properly. Usato wonders if the cub is really okay with everything, but this is one mature bear. As it's ready to go, they prepare to head back, but Usato can't help but think how terrifying Rose is, as she carries him and the bear over her shoulder. Rose revealed that she heard what he said about her being an ogre. She then terrifies our boy as she explains that he won't be getting any sleep tonight. They head home, and Rose reveals that Usato actually passed the test with flying colors. Usato's surprised to hear that he is now qualified for something, and Rose explains that he's now qualified to stand beside her on the battlefield. He still hasn't mastered the basics, but Usato definitely has what it takes. He has the ability to withstand pain, physical aptitude, and a strong mental state. The other two healers never earned that distinction, so she tells Usato that he should be proud. Usato wonders what she means when she says that they might be able to make it, and he is shocked when Rose reveals that the demon army will be attacking soon. The story continues. We see the Demon Lord asks a subordinate Amila about their plan to invade the Linger Kingdom. She confirms that everything is on track and they're all prepared to advance soon. The Demon Lord is relieved and states that she will be the one commanding their army. He mentions they failed their last invasion and warns her that she should give her all while also avoiding death. She gives him some hope and he dismisses her. While walking back, another guy noticed Amila was nervous while having the audience with the Demon Lord. She tells him to do his job instead of teasing her and calls him Monster Dr. Hiruluk. The guy claims his name is already cute and replies that his job is going pretty great after all. He managed to complete a new demon-modified monster prototype. He asks if she wants to see it and she follows him. She then sees a huge snake similar to the one Usato fought before. The demon is hyped out about this monster and reveals its name. Amila, however, mentions that's the same name he used on his last prototype that went missing during their attempt to invade Linger. The guy complains his snake was beaten up by Siglis and it ran away. However, this new monster is way stronger. Still, Amila couldn't care less because she knows there's someone in Linger who's stronger than Siglis. The guy gets curious and asks if she's talking about the kidnappers. She confirms, mentioning they never fight, but they're still on the battlefield carrying the wounded back to the rear at some insane speed. The guy thinks they minimize casualties, but Amila explains the kidnappers' boss is a healer who not only has insane healing skills but is also an excellent fighter. That person is Rose, the strongest person in Linger. Amila deeply hates Rose because Rose fought her master. Yet, The guy didn't stay alive to tell what happened. This monster tells her to calm down because she cannot fight during their invasion because she must command the army. Yet, Amila walks away mentioning she will leave the fight to their immortal dark magic user named Black Knight. Back to Usato, he's happy because he missed his bed to the point where he also enjoys Tong's snores, yet he must wake up and do his stuff. He gives some fruits to the little bear for breakfast and notices Rose's rabbit nearby. However, Usato tells him that he cannot forgive him for taking advantage of his innocence. The rabbit acts cute and Usato almost falls for it. Yet, he tries to refuse to be nice to the rabbit, but he cannot resist it. He keeps giving the bear more fruits and calls it Blurin. Rose arrives repeating the same name and she asks if that's its name. Usato confirms it, mentioning he combined the words blue grizzly. Rose is shocked to hear that but focuses on saying that she told the king about the bear and it will now be the property of the rescue squad. Usato is confused about that and she reveals that the bear must also do his duty if he wants to stay here. The little one is scared with her smile and hides. Turns out that from now on Usato must not only run with weights, but also carry the bear. Rose explains this will be a regime close to what will happen on the battlefield. She tells him to think of the bear as someone who needs rescue. She orders him to start running and he follows her orders. In fact, Usato only considers this as a training with more weight than usual. He thinks that all he needs to do is to control his healing magic properly. Yet, Rose shouts that he's too slow and the wounded will die. Usato complains, but picks up the pace. Suddenly, Tong comes out of a bush and tries to punch him, but Usato avoids it. Another guy comes running into him, but he also dodges. He thinks they're crazy and asks what they are doing. The thugs chase him and explain this is a simulation of what will happen on the battlefield. Usato tries to run faster, but the thugs yell others are hiding too. Yet, Usato speeds up and keeps running for the next hour. The others throw some sticky water balloons from trees, forcing Usato to run while holding his breath. Some appear from the ground with wooden swords and try to hit him, but he dodges. After 3 hours of running, another guy cuts a rope to make Usato play Donkey Kong, but in the 4th hour Usato finally uses his magic but feels strange. The rabbit comes out from a bush and smiles, yet Usato panics and jumps over him thinking the rabbit is doing it again. With time, Usato feels even stranger and finally collapses without knowing why. Usato is confused because he should at least be able to last for half a day. Rose appears, explaining that will be his stamina on the battlefield. Usato is confused, but she explains the human body also gets fatigued from feelings like anxiety, fear, and frustration. That's the reason why he ran out of energy faster than normal. Usato asks what he can do, but she heals him up and tells him to get used to those emotions. She says he must build up his mental fortitude and situational awareness. She then walks away and orders him to run through the town and around the castle during the afternoon. Usato is confused but follows those orders, yet every citizen is shocked to see a guy running in the streets with the blue grizzly on his back. Usato already knew this would happen despite Blurin being a well-behaved monster. Suddenly, the people start smiling as they realize that Usato is also part of the rescue squad. Suddenly Blurin smells something and wakes up. The bear points forward and Usato stops the buy fruit stall. He doesn't have any money but asks the name of those fruits and the old lady calls it Peffles. Usato then asks her why the people aren't freaking out while he carries a monster on his back. The lady replies it's because he's part of the rescue squad. She talks about his uniform and reveals the gang also runs through the city all the time. Usato thinks about it and confirms someone would get used to it after seeing those scary bandits running around. Before he leaves, the lady gives him a Peffles and Blurin eats it. As Usato runs away, a little girl asks the old lady if he belongs to the rescue squad. The lady confirms and asks why she wants to know. The girl simply dismisses it and looks at him. Usato then plans to make a quick stop by the castle to visit Suzune and Kazuki. However, a guy notices him pass by and starts running after him. The guy chases him while asking Usato to stop, but he keeps getting behind. Usato only notices when the guy collapses on the floor and asks if he's okay. Usato heals the guy and asks what he wants. The guy reveals he wanted to say hi because he also is part of the rescue squad. Usato is confused, but the guy introduces himself as Orga Fleur, one of the other two healers. After hearing the whole story, Fleur is impressed to know that Usato was summoned by mistake along with the heroes. Usato claims he almost forgot about it because he's been training hard every day. Fleur thinks Usato is amazing for being able to keep up with Rose's training because he and his sister couldn't. Usato asks if she's the other healer. Fleur confirms, mentioning she's 5 years younger and they run a clinic in the castle town to heal people with magic. Yet, Usato is confused about why Fleur collapsed just now. Fleur explains he's not good at using healing magic on himself, he can only do it to heal others. Usato is surprised there are other types of healers and Fleur confirms, mentioning they're all part of the rescue squad, therefore when it's needed they help their captain and heal everyone. Upon hearing those words, Usato remembers when Rose told him that he would go to the front lines and heal the injured by her side. He gets worried and asks Fleur what their roles on the battlefield are. Fleur replies the bandits retrieve the injured from the front lines, while he and his sister heal them. In short, they're the rear support, yet Usato reveals that he will be going to the front lines with Rose. Fleur is shocked and Usato questions if someone like him can do it. Fleur replies the ones in most danger are the heroes and the knights, and if they get injured they will most likely die, but if they have healers on the front lines, it means those people can be saved. He reveals that's a tough and dangerous job. However, he knows Rose would never bring someone who she didn't completely trust. Usato thinks about his friends and gets worried. Fleur then gets up to return to the clinic and Usato decides to continue his training. Before departing, Fleur asks Usato to not hate Rose because she doesn't know how to measure her words. Yet, Usato tells Fleur to not worry because he never hated her. In fact, he also has some words to tell her. Usato then starts running and Fleur feels relieved that Rose finally met the person she was looking for. Suddenly, Fleur's sister comes to complain asking if he has a death wish for wandering around. He tells her that he's not that frail, but her look tells us otherwise. He then tells her that he just met someone interesting and she gets curious about that person, yet Fleur replies she will eventually meet and like him. Meanwhile, Usato reaches the castle and asks for permission to enter with the bear. The guard allows him, confusing Usato, who asks how he can bring a monster to the castle. The guy replies that Rose has signed it off, so he should go ahead. Upon reaching the training grounds, Usato watches Susan practicing against 3 soldiers. She gets distracted when she sees it and asks about the bear. They take a break and Usato tells her everything about surviving in the forest filled with monsters. Yet she's way more excited to pet Blurin. Usato tells her to go ahead, but Blurin slaps her hand away, refusing her pat. Usato apologizes, saying Blurin is shy, but she is even more excited. She asks Blurin to become her friend, but he bites her hand when she tries to pat him. Usato says this could mean Blur and thinks she's a bad person, but he then bites his hand too. She teases him, but they eventually let it go. Usato then notices the injuries on her hand and she claims it's because she's training seriously. He then holds her hand and heals it, surprising her with his amazing skill. The girl thinks he came all the way here to visit her and blushes, but Usato confirms he came here to visit her and Kazuki. She feels rejected and reveals Kazuki left the kingdom with Siglise to get some combat experience against monsters. While walking, Kazuki asks Siglise if it's true that the Demon Lord's army will start invading soon. Siglise confirms it, mentioning it will probably have a much stronger army than last time, and that's why they summon Susan and Kazuki, heroes who can boost their soldiers' morale. Yet Kazuki is still unsure and hesitates. Still, he promises to give his all, but they all stop because there's a pack of hung wolves in front of them. They prepare to battle and Kazuki makes his resolve. Usato is impressed, but wonders if Kazuki will be okay. Susan replies it will only last some days, but once he returns, she will be the one performing that training. Usato teases her, mentioning she will probably enjoy every moment of becoming OP in another world, yet she complains because he's not worried about her at all. After the conversation, Usato decides to continue his training. He thinks about the other two doing their best for the incoming battle and that they're going to fight. And if they do it, he also wants to somehow help and not be the one staying behind to be protected. He thinks that in his previous world, he only wished to do the things he couldn't. However, this is not who he is anymore. After returning home and putting Blurin to sleep, then Usato meets Rose. She asks if his body has already gotten used to the training and he answers he got a bit used to it, yet he wants to train more. Upon hearing those words, Rose tells him to continue and walks away. Usato stops her to ask about her words to steel himself. He explains that he freaked up after almost dying to the snake and then heard about the incoming invasion. He initially thought he didn't want to be a part of this, yet today he changed his mind. He won't fight or kill enemies, however he will do anything to save everyone because he's a member of the rescue squad. Rose smiles for the first time and bumps her fist into his chest, telling him to have pride in saving people and the values of their squad. Upon hearing those words, Usato smiles and calls her captain. However, the next day Rose wakes up by putting a heavy bag on top of him and tell him the king ordered him to join Susan's training. The story continues. We see Usato asks Rose why he must join Susan's training because Kazuki went with Siglise. Rose explains he was supposed to join Kazuki's training as well. However, she refused because he had just returned from the forest. The king later sent another request to which she couldn't refuse again. She tries to calm him down by mentioning he's only going to act as a healer. If needed, she advises him to simply play his part for the next 3 days and return home. They finally arrive at the meeting point and Susan is happy that Usato will be joining her. She thinks he only brought Blurin with him to help them bond with each other. Yet, Usato explains he only brought Blurin because he hates everyone else. She starts complaining about his lack of empathy and never playing along with her random BS. She then introduces the rest of her group, Oruku the Knight and Korin the Mage. Before leaving, Rose tells Susan to not be reckless because Usato can only heal wounds and cure poison. If someone dies, they will stay dead. Susan takes the advice to heart and Rose thinks she will be fine since she was trained by Siglise. She then turns to Usato and reveals she has no advice for him. He's confused and she approaches him asking if he has a problem with it. Usato replies he's good and she gets going. Yet he's suddenly surprised when Susan talks about how strong Rose is, yet she refuses to explain it when asked about it and starts moving. Meanwhile, at the castle the princess gets worried about Kazuki and asks what he's doing. He explains that he's training his sword skills, but she mentions that he just arrived the day before and was supposed to rest. He dismisses it, explaining he had a great night of sleep and can handle training again. She thinks he's pushing himself too much, but he flexes his muscles to show off he's fine. The princess realizes she's holding his arm and gets shy before walking away. Back at Usato's group, Susan recounts Kazuki's experience while training. Usato didn't expect Kazuki to be so worn out, but he had told Susan the experience was worth it. He battled tons of monsters inside the darkness of Linger, and Susan reveals that's where they're heading to right now. Upon hearing that name, Usato reminds the time he was observing Blurin and his family. He wonders if Blurin misses his home, but that moment is interrupted by Susan asking if the little bear will wake up soon. She thinks this is the perfect chance to pet the bear since he won't bite her. She tries to do it but Usato slaps her hand. She initially gets confused but tries to pet the bear several other times, all denied by Usato's slaps. She finally asks what is he doing that but he replies with the same question. She uses this chance to flirt with him, mentioning he's smacking her hand and talking her down. She thinks he became a sadist but he has no idea of what she's saying. Blurin then wakes up and Usato tells him to walk by himself, but the bear can barely walk straight because he's sleepy. Susan thinks this is her chance. She tells Blurin to hop on her back and she will carry him. Usato tries to stop her from doing it, but Blurin lies on her back. Susan is happy that she finally touched Blurin's fluffy fur and tries to get up. However, she falls flat on her face because the bear is too heavy. Usato helps her out and they continue walking as he tells her to not get hurt outside of battle. She thanks him for healing her, but they're forced to stop because the mage senses multiple presences ahead of them. The knight warns them to be prepared to fight monsters. However, the mage notices he's wrong. Some bandits appear from the bushes as they cannot ambush anyone who already knows about their presence. The bandits do their usual stuff, threatening them to hand over their goods or else. The knight refuses to, making the bandits mention how big their group is. Usato is confused about what the plot is going on, because these guys aren't intimidating at all. He notices Susan pulling his shirt and he tries to be a Chad and reassure her that everything is fine. Still, this crazy girl is excited to see real bandits, mentioning that she has never seen one before. Usato thinks this girl is clearly out of her mind, but Blurin, who was at the back, appears by Usato's side. The bandits start to panic because they never expected someone to tame a blue grizzly. However, one of them tells the others to take a better look because that's just a cub. The rest of the bandits think this is their chance to get a bear and skin it. Usato gets mad at those words, but Susan attacks the bandits before he can do anything else. Usato is impressed that she managed to control her power to simply knock the bandit out with lightning. She explains she practiced a lot to make it perfect, and Usato incentivizes her to go wild. The bandits decide to charge forward, thinking that Susan cannot use her magic if they get close, yet Susan electrocutes them while they run. Usato is acting like a cheerleader while also calling Susan a human stun gun and a human electric eel. Suddenly the mage senses something new. Seconds later, a horde of fall boars passed by them. The knight is confused because these monsters should live deep in the forest. The boards almost hit Usato from the back, but Blurin headbutts them. Susan tries to electrocute the rest, but another boar dashes toward her. Usato tries to protect her, but they get hit and are both projected into the air. They start falling deep into the forest, but Usato uses his body to protect her from the fall. He casts healing magic while taking the heavy hits from the tree branches, but they still end up falling into the nearby river. After returning to the water surface, Usato realizes that's the same river he fell when he came to the forest. He knows there's a waterfall ahead and tells Susan to take a deep breath. After falling, Susan tries to wake him up and carries him to the shore while mentioning that she will pay this debt. Usato then wakes up mentioning he's fine and that this is quite embarrassing. She gets all shy and pushes him away after realizing that he woke up. Usato then uses his magic to heal her wounds, but Susan apologizes for putting him in this situation. He dismisses it, mentioning that he's glad that they at least got into this together. He looks around saying he never expected to return so soon. He then explains that Rose dumped him here to train before, and that this forest is filled with monsters far stronger than those boars. Usato then sits down to check their gear and decide how to move from now on. Susan asks if it's not better to escape the forest because of the monsters. Usato reveals it's about to get dark and it might rain, therefore it's better to find a spot to camp and move tomorrow. She asks if he knows about any safe spot. He replies that he slept on a tree branch and asks if she's fine with it. Susan mentions she never climbed a tree because she was never allowed to despite wanting it. Usato thinks she came from a wealthy family who sheltered her entire life. Usato then finds a cave and decides to camp there, mentioning that not only it will cover them from rain, but it's also better than going deeper into the forest. He then advises her to get out of her wet clothes and she shyly tells him to not peek. After noticing Usato's stupid face, she realizes that he never thought about it. Usato then decides to use Susan's lighting abilities to fish and start a fire. He's quite happy about all of this because he didn't have a fire the last time. However, he notices Susan on the corner. He apologizes for this awkward situation, but she's more into checking all his muscles from afar. She suddenly looks up and sees some monsters. She gets excited and Usato calls them venom monkeys, explaining that he read about them. The monkeys get down and he tells her the monkeys are friendly, but she can get poisoned if she touches them. Yet, Susan is already touching one. Usato asks what the plot is she doing, but she replies that she has already been poisoned by the monkey's cuteness. She tells him there's nothing to fear, but the small monkey bites her finger. She collapses, forcing Usato to cure her. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king gets informed by the mage's familiar that Usato and Susan are missing. Kazuki wants to know more about it and the king explains all the information he currently has. The king reveals he didn't want to reveal this to Kazuki, but the princess forced him to do. Kazuki asks if they already sent a research party, but the king reveals they will depart tomorrow. Kazuki thinks that's too late and decides to head out by himself right now. However, big gorilla mommy Rose appears and tells him to stop. She tells him to not worry because Usato is with Susan. She bluntly explains that Usato won't die so easily, so if Usato is fine, Susan should be safe. Kazuki is shocked to hear that. After all, Usato is a random dude who came here by mistake and got healing magic. Talking about the devil, Usato is having an amazing time thinking it's way easier to survive in the forest with Susan by his side. She gets annoyed because he's literally calling her camping equipment, but he dismisses it. She lets it pass, and since he notices that she's tired, he decides they should sleep in turn, starting by her. She rejects it, mentioning that he should sleep first because he used his healing magic on her. He accepts the deal and lies down. While awake, Susan looks at Usato and asks if he's asleep. He reveals he's still awake and she asks how he feels about being summoned to this world. She asks if he thinks about ever returning home. Usato explains that's a tough question because he does want to go home. Yet, he also has a reason to stay in this world. Susan then reveals she doesn't want to go back, but is surprised that he didn't ask why. He asks her if he should do it and she confirms. He reveals that he knows why she doesn't want to go back. It's because she likes this world more than theirs. Susan confirms, explaining there's nothing left for her in their world. She's willing to throw away her family, friends, or who she was before just to stay here. She reveals that she was waiting her entire life for this moment. She calls it a chance to free herself. She feels she's finally free because she has nothing to tie her down in this world. I guess she forgot she's one of the heroes. Yet, she's surprised to hear Usato say that it sounds good to him. He doesn't understand her expression and she asks if he's not disappointed by who she really is. Usato explains he always wanted to change and stop being an ordinary guy who is passive, therefore he doesn't think they're different from each other. Susan is impressed, but Usato continues. When they arrived, he didn't want to hold them back and that's why he always accepted Rose's training, but now he's determined to protect her, Kazuki and everyone else in this kingdom as a member of the rescue squad. When asked about it, Susan replies she also wants to protect this place as a hero. Upon confirming their resolve, Usato says they will save the kingdom together and forget their old world. Susan smiles, mentioning that Usato has grown a lot since coming here. Usato also reveals that he feels closer to her. In their world, he always thought about her as a flawless, perfect girl, yet Susan is shocked because he never treated her as if she was a perfect girl, but she reveals that she doesn't mind it because she'd rather be close to him than be admired from afar. After blushing, Usato decides to hide his face by going to sleep. The next day, they walk through the forest and Usato tells her to be careful. They hear some noise and prepare for a fight, but turns out to be Blurin, who quickly jumps on top of Usato. The night dude appears out of breath and collapses. After recovering, he explains they've been searching for them, but Blurin suddenly started to run away. They followed him thinking the bear would lead to them, and here they are. Susan tells Blurin he did a good job, but the bear is smelling something and walks in a certain direction. He stops at a place and Susan asks where they are. Usato explains this was Blurin's home before his parents were killed by a giant snake. Usato feels sad for the little bear, but Blurin comes to him, making them confused. Usato thinks Blurin wants to go and Susan is impressed. The bear already made his decision. She explains that Blurin knows that he belongs by Usato's side. Blurin starts walking away and Susan tells Usato it's time to return home. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.